right, let's dive right into this explainer, because today we're cracking open a highly classified, heavily redacted Black Ops dossier. And honestly, it claims the entire official history of the Cold War is just a manufactured illusion. Based on the source material we're digging into, we are going to explore a really tense, high-stakes espionage operation from 1961 that totally redefines what the world's superpowers were actually fighting over. Now, this concept is wild. It really forces us to reframe the entire 20th century. According to these files, behind the curtain of that whole nuclear standoff we all learned about in school, the CIA and the KGB were fighting a desperate shadow war. But get this, it wasn't a race to build the first intercontinental ballistic missile. No, it was a ruthless scramble to secure ancient, mass-reducing physics and non-human biology buried deep beneath the Egyptian sand. We kick off our forensic audit here with some truly terrifying black and white footage. This was actually smuggled out of Moscow after the collapse of the Soviet Union by a Russian astrophysicist named Viktor Ivanovich. The leaked 1961 film depicts Soviet military personnel breaching a hidden subterranean chamber at Giza. Initially, you've got soldiers entering the tomb in just their standard military uniforms, only to retreat in a total panic and return wearing heavy-duty radiation hazmat suits. I mean, that's not exactly standard issue for desert archaeology, right? It raises an immediate, terrifying question. What lethally radioactive object did the Soviets unearth down there? Okay, so to really understand the Soviet panic in '61, we've got to rewind the timeline and see what the Americans did first. Back in 1952, using the violent chaos of the Egyptian Revolution as a sort of geopolitical smokescreen, embedded CIA operatives completely bypassed Egyptian antiquities authorities. They physically verified subterranean coordinates, putting together a classified archive that explicitly references a temple beneath the Sphinx. So, 9 years later, the Soviet Union retaliates with their own highly classified, militarized recovery operation. They called it Project ISIS. And this illustrates the geopolitical smokescreen brilliantly. The global press bought the cover story hook, line, and sinker. They thought Soviet funding was flowing into Egypt solely for the construction of the massive Aswan High Dam. But the operational reality? Totally different. The Aswan project was basically a massive logistical distraction. The true cost of that Soviet alliance was getting unrestricted access to the Giza Plateau for the KGB and the Soviet Academy of Sciences. Section 1. Project ISIS and the Breach. So the crucial point here is that while operating on those classified coordinates to locate what their intelligence files called the Tomb of the Visitor, the KGB breached a hidden chamber. And the second they did, their dosimeters and Geiger-Müller counters absolutely spiked. That shift to hazmat suits wasn't some kind of biological precaution, it was a strict physical necessity. That massive basalt sarcophagus inside the room wasn't just a stone box, it was literally acting as a radioactive containment vessel. Grounding this in absolute physics for a second, the Soviet scientists understood exactly what they were dealing with. They relied on the inverse square law of radiation, where the intensity of radiation drops off exponentially the further away you get from the source. To even approach that breached basalt box without suffering acute cellular degradation from lethal Bremsstrahlung radiation, they absolutely required heavy lead shielding. The tomb was highly radioactive simply because the artifacts inside utilized decay isotopic power sources that had been emitting gamma radiation for millennia. Section 2. The Payload. The Visitor. Let's dive into exactly what they found when they thermodynamically breached that massive basalt box. The unredacted KGB manifest logs show they definitely didn't find a human pharaoh. Instead, they recovered the mummified biological remains of a humanoid entity measuring over 2 meters tall. The files identify this as a pre-Diluvian guardian operator, and it wasn't buried alone. Recovered alongside this biology were complex, solid-state crystalline devices, plus shielding materials exhibiting ambient temperature superconductivity. Basically, these are technological power cells using extreme piezoelectric materials. Now, to verify the terrifying extreme age of this visitor, Soviet scientists utilized the immutable physics of radiocarbon dating. They applied the exponential decay equation directly to the biological remains, relying on that exact 5,730-year half-life of carbon-14. They needed absolute mathematical certainty of exactly when this entity walked the Earth. And here are the results of that isotopic decay analysis. It mathematically locked the entity's time of death to exactly 10,500 BCE. So to put that into perspective, that is approximately 12,500 years ago. Why does this matter? Well, according to the files, this mathematically proved to the Soviets that they now possessed a biological entity from a lost civilization. That exact timestamp, 10,500 BCE, aligns flawlessly with the geological boundary of the Younger Dryas Cataclysm. You know, that period of massive global flooding and destruction. Not only that, it also aligns perfectly with the precise astrological epoch when the Great Sphinx directly faced the constellation of Leo. The Soviets realized they had their hands on the very architects of the ancient world. Section 3. The True Arms Race. You can imagine the sheer panic this triggered within the American military-industrial complex when the CIA's Directorate of Plans learned the KGB had successfully secured the Visitor and its tech. To maintain technological parity with this massive KGB acquisition, the U.S. desperately accelerated their own secret programs. The source texts note that operations were funneled directly into unacknowledged special access programs over at the Foreign Technology Division at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Their primary goal? To reverse engineer the acoustic, solid-state physics of the ancient Guardian network, specifically focusing on replicating that ancient barium titanate dielectric physics. So, the source texts draw this direct, undeniable pipeline going from the radioactive, mass-reducing crystalline power cells scavenged by the KGB in Egypt in 1961 straight over to the highly classified airspace hardware and patents being officially developed by the U.S. military decades later. For instance, decades later, Dr. Salvatore Pais authored these exact patents for the U.S. Navy. We're talking about a craft using an inertial mass reduction device and a high-frequency gravitational wave generator. The dossier suggests that shadowy elements of the defense sector were essentially forced to officially patent the physics of space-time manipulation just to ensure the Russians didn't monopolize the mathematics derived from that ancient grid. So I want to leave you with this really provocative thought from the source material. The Cold War was never truly about the ideologies we were sold. If the real operational reality of the 20th century was a shadowy scramble to unearth the radioactive hardware of a forgotten pre-Diluvian cataclysm, what exactly are they building with it today? The arms race didn't end, right? It just moved into the quantum spectrum, using ancient technology they were perhaps never meant to find. Keep questioning the narrative, and thanks for joining me for this explainer.